Hey guys, I'm back. I'm Steffi from Books That Teach Us, and I've got a great one for you today because we are focusing on powerful female leads in stories. And I've got my top 25. I'm going to cover a whole range of different genres. I've got some fantasy, I've got a young adult recommendation, a couple of non-fiction ones I've thrown in there, although I'm thinking about doing a whole non-fiction one on impressive women. So watch this space for that one. For book number 1, I'm going to start with the book that started it all. I credit this book with one of the reasons that I became such an avid reader, and it is Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials. The first one in the series is Northern Lights, and the heroine of the story is Lyra Belacqua. My hero growing up. I've mentioned this book once before on my booktube as well. I always recommend my students to read this book as well and try and encourage them to enjoy this. I've reread it as an adult and I still really loved this incredible adventure story which opens up the possibility of other worlds that are hanging around out here, and Lyra is really at the heart of this story. She appears to be at the beginning of the book an orphan child. She grew up running around Oxford and in one of the colleges in the UK, and I have some parallels there because my hometown is actually Cambridge, where I grew up. And one of the amazing things about the world that Lyra grows up in is that everybody has a demon that is kind of a part of their soul that is outside the body that can shapeshift into different animals, and you can converse with it. So I think it really captures this idea of having an inner voice and conscience and that talking that you hear in your head, but it's actually out loud with your demon. Lyra goes on this massive adventure story. Some sad things happen, some scary things happen. There's people kidnapping children in it, including her best friend. So she starts off in this adventure to go and try and find him and figure out what is happening. Along the way, she discovers she has quite impressive insight into using what they call the alpheometer, although I believe in the American version they call it the golden compass, which is something that can answer questions and guide you through life. It's like a little machine, and Lyra is one of the few people in her world that can actually read this, and it's supposed to help her find answers, to guide other people. She has some revelations about who her parents are through this story. And it's kind of this whole journey of Lyra from a kind of wild, youthful child who's very impulsive into, by the third book in the trilogy, growing into young adult, an older teenager, the experiences, suddenly becoming less impulsive, more thoughtful, more considerate, and she's just a really awesome character. There's a lot of spin-offs about her that Philip Pullman has written, in one called The Book of Dust, which tells the story of Lyra as a baby and how she got to Oxford in the first place, as a safe space where she could grow up. So that's really worth a read as well. Perhaps I'm going to do a whole young adults series, I think, because I'm a teacher. I read a lot of young adult books and always make recommendations to my students, which is one of my favourite things about teaching. Number 2 I have here with me. It is by Abby Dare and it is called The Girl with the Louding Voice. Not gonna lie, this book broke me a little bit. It is very emotional. There's a lot of trauma, violence that happens in it, particularly towards the main character of Adoni, who is 14 at the start of the book and growing up in a fairly remote Nigerian village, and she's determined to better herself. She runs away, she's mouthy, she's joyful, she just wants to make something of her life more than what the world has ordained her to have. Although she manages to get away from her home village, she ends up in a very difficult, challenging, violent situation working as a housemaid in Lagos in Nigeria. And I think that was one of the things that opened my eyes a little bit, was to what must be the fate of some domestic workers around the world. We see lots of news articles about this every now and then, the treatment of people who are working in homes, particularly the homes of the wealthy. And I think this book does a really good job of opening up your eyes to that. It's not an easy read. I definitely think it needs to come with a trigger warning. If you like your books that make you feel a bit of social justice, that teach you something about people in different situations to us, then I really recommend A Girl with a Louding Voice. It will definitely make you cry though. 3 is Transcendent Kingdom by Yak Gyasi. And Yak is a Ghanaian writer. She's written a book that's more famous than this one, which is Homecoming, which I still have yet to read, but I'm planning to. And I know some people have recommended in my comments before that I need to read Homecoming. This book just stole my heart a little bit. In terms of the action that happens in the book, there's really not that much that goes on. It's much more about the family dynamics of a Ghanaian family, immigrant family living in the US, and a family crisis that has happened, a death to one of the family members. So it's really about grief. There's a lot of interesting facts about science in there. The main character, she's a scientist. She is really trying to overcome her grief, be there for her mother, figure out who she is without this family member, trying to understand addiction and what happened to lead that family member to his death. And that's one of the things why she's studying addiction in mice, and that's where a lot of the science comes in, which is really interesting. And I think lots of it is actually factually correct about the neurons in the brain and what kind of turns on when we become addicted to substances. And I think that was just really fascinating for me. I think one of the main things is that this character, she's so closed off from the world at the beginning, the things she's gone through, experience of racism, life in the US, and very closed off to colleagues who are reaching out to her, and you're just really rooting for her the whole way through the book. You're like, come on, reach out to someone, connect with them, share your story. And she does start to kind of unravel that guard that she has up. And it's just really beautiful depiction of mother-daughter relationships as well, and the struggles of immigrant families. And I think you just really root for the characters in this book, and it's just, yeah, really breathtaking. Definitely recommend. If you're going to read one book this year, this should be it. Number 4 is one of my non-fiction recommendations, because this woman was so inspiring, and the author herself is also quite inspiring. It's Sophia by Anita Anand. I've mentioned this book before in some of my non-fiction recommendations for things I cannot believe are true. So Anita Anand discovered this picture of a woman who turned out to be Princess Sophia. She was living in the early 90s in England. She is the princess of Sudeep Singh, who was basically the British Empire managed to steal his Sikh kingdom away from him in the north of India, and he came to England. He grew up among the court with Queen Victoria. Really seemed like they were treating him nicely, but they actually weren't. It was very exploitative. It's where the story of the Kohinoor diamond comes in. And this is just a biography of Sophia's life, but it really reads like a story. And that's one of the things that really grabbed me about it, is that all of this research that Anita must have done, and I think that's one of the reasons why it captured me so much. And Sophia went through so much in her life, and she did a lot of things for other people, for different communities, to really help them. And so I think she was really admirable in that, because she'd been dealt quite a challenging hand in her situation in society at the time. Suffragettes, and was fighting for women's rights. She did a lot to help the Indians who were working class and living in quite a lot of poverty in London at the time. So just a really inspiring character, and definitely going there as she might not seem powerful at the beginning, but then you do think, well, there are moments where she has power, she steps into it, she commands these spaces that she's in, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a non-fiction read, always recommend Anita Anand and her books. Number 5, I'm going to do one more non-fiction recommendation, which is Educated by Tara Westover. For those of you who aren't aware of this book, Tara Westover grew up in a very abusive family in the US. They were Mormons, but not Mormons like many people would recognize. They are very loose with their health and safety. They wouldn't ensure that their children went to school. They wouldn't ensure that their children wore seatbelts in the car. They thought that it was up to God if they were going to do something. They did really dangerous jobs involving a lot of metal, and there were a lot of incidents and injuries in the story that the family won't take anyone to hospital to get better for. There's a lot of births that happen outside of medical establishments, but where people aren't even trained in helping people give birth. So a lot of kind of quite shocking things that I learned about there. And Tara somehow defies all the odds of kind of being homeschooled, where her family don't particularly care about her education, and manages to go to university and eventually actually get accepted into Cambridge University, one of the top unis in the world, despite all these things being against her. And I do think it's a really shocking but quite inspiring story, but definitely needs some trigger warnings for some of the violence that happened to her in her life and the trauma that she must live with because of that. Number 6, this is one of my all-time favourite books. It is Colored 1,000 Splendid Suns. This follows 2 incredible female characters. Each chapter is from a different point of view. One of them from Mariam, who is the older wife, and Layla, who is the younger new wife. They are both married to the same abusive man in Afghanistan. It's around the 60s to the 2000s, and talks a lot about the Taliban's rise to power, about extremism, about the treatment of women, and about how Mariam and Layla start off as these enemies and feels she's been usurped in her own home. And really it's about the strength that they get from each other and the friendship and the bond that they build in the face of all this awful abuse that is being thrown at them. And I think it's just one of the best books out there if you haven't read it yet. It is an emotional roller coaster, but one that is well worth it. Number 7 is Barbara Kingsolver, Flight Behaviour. Now, I really enjoyed this book. It was very quirky. It wasn't what I was expecting. And the main character is an outsider to the town, and she marries in to a family. Everyone's in farming. They've all lived in the Appalachians forever. Right at the beginning of the book, she is running away up a mountain, and she's thinking about having an affair, leaving her kids, leaving her husband, and she's just absolutely had enough. And she appears at the top of this mountain, and there's all of these orange things around, and she can't understand it because she's forgotten her glasses, which I feel like a lot of us can relate to. And she can't figure out what they are. And then eventually she goes back, and they are monarch butterflies. And she doesn't really have this connection with nature, but it's something that builds over the course of the book, is trying to understand why these butterflies they're all over the trees. She's not sure if some of them are dying, and it becomes this really powerful story of her stepping into her own and who she's meant to be, and being able to make decisions for herself and work out her place in the world in this town where she is an outsider. And there's a lot there that links in with climate change and why the monarch butterflies are where they are, should they be there, and just some really beautiful storytelling by Barbara Kingsolver. I've also thought now retrospectively I should have included Kuna in there, which follows the story of Frida Kahlo. But maybe I'll have to do a whole different one. Maybe I'll do a whole one of Barbara Kingsolver books, because I've read a lot of them. So subscribe if you're interested in that in the future. Number 8, I am going to do a couple of the Greek myth retellings here, because I think they're full of really powerful, badass women, and Atalanta is going to be one of them. Atalanta is by Jennifer Saint, and it's kind of like a feminist retelling of the story of Atalanta, who was one of the Argonauts, who were all men apart from her, and so she always felt like she had to prove her worth, prove who she was. She was raised in the forest by Artemis, so she doesn't really fit into society anywhere, and it's the tale of her realizing her strength, her power, realizing her place in the world with these men, going off on these adventures, very judgy of lots of these awful men who are around, who all they want is glory. and Atalanta actually wants to find a purpose, a higher purpose. And I just absolutely love the Greek myth retellings. I'm going to do a whole video on the retellings that I've read so far. I just got inspired because I actually watched Troy on Netflix recently, Troy Fall of a City, which was a really good dramatization, and so that got me back into it. So I'm definitely going to be reading some more Greek mythology coming your way soon. That leads me on to my 9th book, which is also by Jennifer Saint, but this one is Ariadne. And I think this one has been a bit more criticised because it maybe deviates a bit more from the Greek myths, but I don't care because I think it's a fantastic book. It is the story of Ariadne, who, for those of you who don't know, she grew up on Crete, which I visited once and just loved being there around all these amazing mythological stories that I grew up reading about. And she's the daughter of King Minos. And of course the Minotaur is there. I'm not going to spoil too much about the story, but there's a lot about the Minotaur that is revealed in the story. So there's kind of a big twist that happens, and it's almost like Ariadne's meant to be this helpless person who Theseus comes and rescues her from the Minotaur. And actually the way Jennifer Saint has retold it is there's all of these back things, and that Ariadne is very much the master of her own fate in the story. She is the one who helps Theseus. She tells him how to get the Minotaur, and then she sails away with him and he abandons her, and it's all about her life after that on this island where she's basically been abandoned. And honestly, thank God she was, because she goes off and has this whole story interacting with the gods and lots of people who get shipwrecked on her island, and it's this great kind of rollicking adventure story with Ariadne and her at the start of it. And it's actually one of the first of all the myth retellings that I read, so I really recommend it. Number 10 is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is such a lovely, sweet story, and when I tell you the topic, you're not going to believe me, but it is. So right at the beginning of the book, the main character is called Nora, and she is committing suicide. So trigger warning there. And when she has taken all these pills in order to commit suicide, she goes into this library in her mind where she can pull different books and go into different versions of what her life could have been based on the different choices that she made, whether it was a boyfriend that she's decided to go out with, a job that she took, a country that she decided to live in. And I absolutely adore stories like that, where it's all of the alternative possibilities. I've actually got a whole playlist that I'm starting to make notes on for books that have that, books that show different life possibilities. So watch this space for that playlist coming soon. I just think it's really inspiring to think these are all the different ways that life could have gone, and I think we all wonder that a little bit, and Nora in her head gets to live that out, and it's kind of to see, oh, what would have made her happy, what would have given her a purpose in her life if she'd done all these different things, and is it too late for her to do that? And so what is obviously starts off as quite a heavy topic does actually end in a really meaningful and beautiful story of what are we all doing with our lives and how can we find our purpose. I think there's that really good thing about time travel that I read recently, where no one thinks the little things you do every day can change your life, but when we talk about time travel, like if you go back and you change one thing, we're all terrified that we can mess everything up. And I think that's so true. Like, we never consider that properly, fully. So yes, this book definitely makes you think about that, and it's just a really heartwarming read. Number 11 is Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez, and I haven't actually finished this book yet. I'm halfway through. I'm having to read it in small doses, not because it isn't good, but because it keeps making me really angry. This is a non-fiction read into how women have been kept out of data sets, some purposefully, some just by sheer negligence and ignorance, and how it is affecting us. So from things like seatbelts and what are they called, those things that hit you on the car? Anyway, if you have a crash, the thing that blows up in your face, how all of those things are designed around men's bodies because they've only ever used men's bodies in the testing. A lot of things about women's health that have been completely disregarded, to the fact that no one knows the signs for women having heart attacks because we're only taught the signs of men having them, which is, you know, left hand and this one. And I've just done a first aid course, And I'm really glad that a few of the women we were talking about at school were bringing up, no, they're not the only signs of a heart attack, actually. One of women's ones for having a heart attack, just so everybody knows, is that you sometimes get really, really bad indigestion and you feel very breathless. So sometimes really bad indigestion coming up, that's what it can feel like for women. So I think this book is just full of absolutely essential, potentially life-saving information that is just not getting out there because women are ignored from data sets. And there's a lot of things lately about science as well, about scientists testing on men's cells, because I think I've got this right. If you're a scientist, please feel free to correct me below. But men have the 24-hour cycle for hormones. Women have obviously a 28-day hormone cycle. So actually to use men's cells is much more stable and it gets better results in the lab. So we're just ignored with our cells and our cycles. So I found that really shocking and I felt very indignant at a lot of injustice as I read this book. That's why I'm kind of dipping in and out of it. But I definitely recommend it. Caroline Criado Perez has actually done a lot of really great activist work in the UK in terms of lobbying government policies. She actually made sure that they didn't take the only woman off one of the banknotes when they were talking about changing things. She got statues put up of important women. Just a lot of things that she's doing for female recognition, which is really impressive. This book also had some really shocking things about like tech and how women actually are more likely to buy phones, but the phones are all made for men. And I feel like, leave me a comment if you agree with this, but actually phones feel quite heavy for smaller hands. And a lot of women tend to have smaller hands. So just all sorts of things like that where we've just been completely ignored. So this isn't quite about badass women, but she is a badass woman writing this book. And I think everybody should read it so that we are making sure that we are protecting women for the future and making things actually equal and equitable. Number 12, I've gone a bit of a curveball here, but I've gone for a classic. So I've gone for Mole Flanders by Daniel Defoe. So this book was actually written it was set in the 18th century, and Mole is telling her story, and it's of scandal and crime and survival, and she's just this really incredible character, so seemingly before her time, and it's just her constant need to thrive and survive and to improve her life and get out from where she is, get out from poverty, get away from, the gutter of England where she's supposed to stay simply because she was born into a poor family. And so it's a really inspiring book and quite a comment on class and society at the time by Daniel Defoe. And she doesn't always do things you agree with, but it does really have you rooting for her. So I recommend this if you're up for a classic read. I also have a classic playlist coming soon, so yes, subscribe if you're interested in that. Number 13 is The Bastard of Istanbul by Elif Shafak. Some of you may know I absolutely adore Elif Shafak already. I've read almost all of her books. I've got a few more on my list. The new one about the river and the sky I really want to read. And this one I read in preparation for my trip to Istanbul the summer before last. And I think it's full of amazing women because it follows a whole family where they are all women in the family. So they're mostly sisters, and then there's some nieces in the family too. And chapters are told from different characters. There's mentions about the Armenian genocide, which is really, to me, really eye-opening because I really don't know much about it. It's not anything I learned at school. So I've been learning a bit more about it from that book. And I think all the characters, they're very quirky. There's some really horrific trauma that happens to a couple of the characters, and they're trying to come to terms with that throughout the book and kind of grow into just deal with the trauma and still be their own person despite what happened to them. So yeah, I definitely say it's full of quite a few different powerful women in that book. So definitely recommend that, especially if you're a Elif Shafak fan. So number 14 is Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Obviously Adichie has to be on this list somewhere to talk about powerful women. The character in this book is a young Nigerian woman who moves to the US I can't remember if she studies or she works there first, but she starts a blog. It's like this whole commentary on racism, which is obviously not something she'd ever experienced back in Nigeria. When she came to the US, there's a lot of really hopeful things that made me quite sad reading it. in retrospect about Obama coming to power and the hope that a lot of people felt in the US at that point. It's a lot about identity, her working out who she is, navigating relationships, and step into her own, find her voice, and survive in the US today. So I really enjoyed it, and I loved all of Adichie's writing. I think she's really, really powerful author that can really make you feel emotions for her characters. Number 15 is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. And this book is so unusually written because it doesn't have any punctuation. So you can't always figure out who is speaking and whose thoughts and whose... Everything kind of runs on, it's almost like a free flow of thoughts and dialogue and what's happening. And it follows mostly a group of Black British women and their stories, and they're all separate, and then it does that great thing of where they all start to intertwine, but it's not obvious how they're going to intertwine. So I really enjoyed it for that fact of trying to work out, well, how is this character going to bump into this character? And it's a lot of things about race, about all sorts of different communities. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting in it was it follows people who are squatting in a home and hippie movements and a lot of interesting things like that. There's some really shocking things about slavery and about different generations within the UK. And it's a really, really powerful read. But I will say the fact that it doesn't have punctuation, I found a little bit challenging. So just a little heads up about that. Like, you have to kind of concentrate quite a bit when you're reading it. Which I guess was the point of why the author did that. But yeah, definitely really eye-opening book. Lots of amazing women in it and some shocking revelations that they go through as well. Number 16. Oh, I do have one more Greek myth retelling here, which is Electra. And I was re-looking up this book the other day because I watched Troy. We have Clytemnestra there. So Electra is the daughter of Clytemnestra and Agamemnon. Agamemnon, one of the bullies, one of the toxic masculine people of the Greek world, and you kind of just really hate him. Let me know if you don't, but I feel like he's generally known as the villain and an awful person, and did something really, really shocking to one of his own family members, which not always surprising in Greece, but it was in this story. And so this book follows Electra, the daughter, Clytemnestra, who is Agamemnon's wife, Electra's mother, and Cassandra, who was one of the daughters of Troy, who was captured by Agamemnon and brought back to Clytemnestra's home after the fall of Troy. And Cassandra can predict the future, but is cursed by the gods so that no one will ever believe her. So there's kind of that dramatic irony going on. We know what's going to happen, Cassandra knows what's going to happen, but the other characters don't. And this book is very violent, just a heads up about it. Clytemnestra then is like this power, is like this obsession for revenge, for what happened to her daughter, not Electra, different daughter. I won't say any spoilers in case you don't know the story. And it's really about like, how far will people go for that revenge? Like, do people deserve what's coming to them? Is there another way, a gentler way? And yes, you might think there should be a gentler way, but I think in this book you just feel so indignant on behalf of Clytemnestra. But then you do also feel sorry for Electra, so there's just a lot going on there. It's by Jennifer Saint. Just a really good, powerful women who get thrown around by all these horrible toxic men in their lives and then come out sometimes stronger for it, or certainly different for it as they kind of make their way to survival. Number 17, I've got one more classic for you. It is Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. I really love this book. I've read this book multiple times. I don't think for studying, I read it for my own pleasure multiple times, and it follows the story of Lady Chatterley, who marries I think he's a war hero, who is very cold, very distant. He is not really interested in being an intimate partner with Connie. This book was actually banned when it was published in 1928 because it was so raunchy. And I think it's one of the first books to use the C word, if I've got that correct. So if you're offended easily, maybe don't read this book. But basically, Connie falls in love and starts having sex with the gamekeeper. So she's the lady of the house. So there's a lots of kind of things about different classism, about repression, about the sexes. One of the things that I remember reading, and this is probably when I read it as an older teenager, was there's a line in it where Lady Chatterley says how ridiculous men are, and her husband, he's like putting all of his happiness on her and saying, oh, you know, you're responsible for my happiness, you're my everything. And she's saying how utterly ridiculous that is. Like, you need to be your own person. Like, you can't possibly dump all of your happiness and your things on me. And I think it's very ahead of its time, because I feel like quite a few of us feel like that now. Like, yes, our relationships are important, but someone cannot be your whole everything. You need to be everything to yourself. And so, yeah, I think, Connie's definitely one of those badass women. And yes, not obviously everything goes to plan for her in the book. But yeah, I think it's a great read. Let me know if you've read it and what you thought below. I feel like some people might disagree with me about this one, but I really enjoyed it. This is Elizabeth Gilbert with Eat, Pray, Love. So this is Elizabeth's memoir of when she spent 3 months eating, praying and loving around the world. So 3 months in Italy eating, 3 months in India in an ashram, that's the spiritual part of it, and then she falls in love in Bali. And Elizabeth Gilbert is just such a fascinating person. I'm really interested in her. I've listened to her TED Talks. She's gone through some really emotional things. This book really actually helped me to understand depression and how it can manifest, and a little bit what it can feel like for people who suffer from depression, and how they're trying to keep themselves out of it and stay mentally healthy, how challenging that can be, how it keeps kind of creeping up and trying to drag you back down. So it just really helped with my understanding of that. And I think Elizabeth Gilbert is really quite an inspiring person. I absolutely adored her other non-fiction book called Big Magic. Check that out. That's on my list of 20 best non-fiction books of all time. You can watch that hereafter. So yeah, I know some people have called Elizabeth Gilbert out on the privilege of having a book deal and getting to travel around the world for 9 months, but I mean, if you get to do it, then why not? I think she's a great writer, and I have read the book multiple times over actually. So I really recommend it. Don't watch the film and then think it's rubbish. It's not. It's really nothing like the film. I feel like the film does very little to capture the depression and the hole that Elizabeth Gilbert is in. Like, it just really like scoops over all that, which is just not true. This is why she's so deeply unhappy in her situation and trying to make things better and trying to find herself again and trying to find her joy and her purpose. And yeah, I really recommend it. Don't trust Julia Roberts in the film. Number 19. I reread this one recently. It is by Gail Honeyman and called Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It's a really quirky, sweet read, has a big twist in it. Basically, you start off with Eleanor Oliphant and she seems a very weird, odd woman. You don't really get her. It's very funny in parts. You wonder if perhaps she is maybe on the autistic spectrum, because there's a lot of social things that she really doesn't connect with or understand. And when her colleagues are joking, sometimes they're a little bit mean to her as well. She just doesn't get it. She takes everything at face value. She does the same things every day, very stuck in her routine, and you're thinking, well, why is she like that? And so you're wondering all the way through what's going on with her. Then it reveals that something happened in her childhood, but we don't really know what yet. So there's quite a big reveal that's going to come at the end. And it's just a really joyful read, because Eleanor's coming into her own and stepping into, oh yeah, well, I know I'm quirky, and people then start to respect her for that as she respects herself for it. And yeah, there's definitely there's a kind of traumatic thing that happens to her, so I don't want to gloss over it too much. Like, there are some really sad parts about repressed memories and therapy and things in it, but I just think it's a really heartwarming read that really makes you just root for Eleanor. Number 20. I'm not only obsessed with Greek myth retellings, I also love the Hindu epics. This is a retelling called The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, if I said that correctly. Apologies if I did not. And it's a retelling of one of the Hindu myths, and it follows Draupadi, who, according to the Hindu myths, was married to 5 husbands, all who had kind of mythological, magical powers and were slightly godlike. And you only ever have heard normally about the 5 men, and very little about Draupadi. So this centres her right in the middle as the powerful, fascinating character that she is in this mythology, and everything is from her point of view, with these different husbands and what was going on there and the twists of fate that led her to be there and how she copes with it all. And it's just a really interesting, eye-opening read. Taught me a lot about kind of ancient India, which I love, and I definitely recommend it because, yeah, go Draupadi, we need to know more about her. Number 21 is Girls Burn Brighter by Shobha Rao. And I just finished this book 2 days ago, and I'm not gonna lie, it absolutely broke me. There are parts of this that are really, I'm not even gonna say hard to read, they're horrific to read. This needs to come with a massive warning. I got it from school. It's only for 16 plus at the school where I work in our library. I would say even older than that. Like, I wouldn't necessarily want people who are really impressionable to read this book, because there's a lot of sexual abuse, rape that happens in it, and it's just really, really emotional. Really emotional. I think it's a really important read though, if you feel you can stomach it, because it is about what happens to young women, girls, when they're living in poverty, and how the world preys on them, how the patriarchy preys on them. There's a lot about kind of organised crime, about brothels, sex workers, human trafficking, shepherding. It's really quite, yeah. Okay, I can still feel it here when I talk about it. However, the reason it's on my Powerful Women book is that the 2 main characters in it are Purnima and Savita, and they are 2 friends that are really close from girlhood in their village. Both grew up in poverty and both run away because of very traumatic incidences that happened to them, and all they do is run straight slap bang into even more trauma and abuse. That continues, and all they do the whole way through is try and find their inner fire. So that's why it's called Girls Burn Brighter. It's like everything's trying to trap them, keep them down, knock them down, and at times they feel that and they stay down, and then they realise no, they have this fire inside them. They get separated very early on in the book, and it's all about, can they try and find their way back to each other? Can they keep having some sort of human dignity despite all the horrific things that happen to them? And it's a lot about the underworld in India, and then they are both trafficked to the US, and about what happens in the underworld there as well. And it's just really, yeah, it's a tough read. It's also probably one of the best fiction books that I've read in a while, in terms of ability to move me, ability to make me angry and want to fight for injustice. I do quite a lot of work with refugees in my local community here, and it's something, yeah, that I feel really strongly about, is kind of protecting girls and young women. So it's not an easy read, but if you can stomach it, I really recommend it. It's very touching. Number 22, I have talked about this book before because I'm obsessed with it. It is by Rebecca Skloot, and it is called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Now, I had to put this on my list because both Rebecca Skloot and Henrietta Lacks are women well worth honouring. However, they are not necessarily all powerful. Rebecca Skloot is a journalist who wrote this book. It is a nonfiction book based on Rebecca's research into Henrietta Lacks and her family members, whose cells were taken from her body when she was dying without her consent, and her cells revolutionised science. Big Pharma are still profiting to this day from the cells of Henrietta Lacks, and her family were living on the breadline, no access to medical insurance, and all her daughter really wanted was for the acknowledgement of what her mother had done for science. So this is my little ode to that. I have a whole post only on this book, so I'm going to link that here. And I've also linked in the description of that one, I've linked a donation page that I donated to. And if you've got some extra money, then that would be nice. You can donate to the foundation that Rebecca Skloot set up for the family and the town where Henrietta Lacks was born. This book was absolutely incredible about science. I had no idea any of it, really. I was very ignorant of all of it. And I've since encouraged some of the science teachers at work to read this book too. But I think Henrietta Lacks didn't have any power when she was born and died in the 1950s in the US. And so I think this is a nice way of giving her a little bit of power back and telling her story. Number 23. I've included a book that I didn't totally love, but I do think the character is really badass in it. This was called The Poppy Wars, or The Poppy War, by R.F. Kuang, who's very well known for Yellowface and Babel. But this book is one of those, I think we call it dark academia now, so it's quite like fantasy. Lots of it's inspired by Chinese history. I actually thought it was going to be a bit more historical fiction and tell me a bit more and teach me about the Poppy Wars that happened, but it's not really. It's based on a fictional war, but obviously has some parallels with real things that happened. But the main character in it, she comes from a very poor background and she manages to get her way into this elite school which teach you fighting, becoming a warrior, and so you can be used by the Chinese political classes in their wars. And this is the first one in a series. Now, I didn't really realise how kind of fantasy it was, so I don't think it's totally my thing. It was also incredibly violent. Like, there's some images and scenes in it that, despite some things being monsters, it really got to me. So I think the violence was a little bit much for me. But if you love fantasy and you love violence and you love powerful women, then this is definitely a girl who goes to school and grows up, and you see her stepping into her own and starting to wield her own power and realise who she is and make connections and understand the world around her a little bit more compared with, say, the village where she grew up. There's some really crazy things that she does in the book. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but yeah, she's definitely a very ambitious, driven character, so that's why she's on the list. We are getting there. Two more. Number 24 is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I really enjoyed this book. I thought I loved all the connections with nature. Aya is the main character. She's a girl who has been abandoned basically by her family, and she grows up wild, alone in the North Carolina marshes, trying to fit in with some elements of society when she goes to school, but never really fitting in with anyone. There's a great big twist at the end, which is awesome. I will not give you any spoilers about it, but it's really, really cool. Yeah, you just really feel for this character. You're rooting for her the whole way through. You think, you know, how could she possibly have done some of those things because of how she grew up, and this wild child living in the forest, and no one really looked after her, knows everything there is to know about the plants and the animals in the area. So I love that kind of nature connection that she had in the book. And I actually made a point of not watching this film because I felt like it was so good in my head. I didn't want to see it played out on screen, although some people told me the film was quite good, but I wouldn't recommend watching the film first anyway, because I just think this book is really fantastic and I wouldn't want anyone to take away from that. And my last one is The Mercies by Karen Millward Hargrave. Again, quite a challenging read in terms of it being an emotional roller coaster. It is based in the 1600s on an island off of Norway. It follows some amazing women in the village where they live. I think it's like a tsunami wipes out all of the men when they are out fishing, and only the women are left. And you kind of think, oh my god, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be like all these badass women who are there on this island or coastal town. But actually it's not. It then turns into really shocking things that happen when the Christians come over from, I think, England, and this really happened, and start this massive witch hunt about women and who's witches. And it's really moving, very emotional, amazing female characters throughout who are determined to survive anything, including all the oppression and violence that they face. So I really recommend it. I'm realizing now I'm going to have a sneaky number 26 because I forgot to add in The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C, which is just absolutely incredible. There's a few parallels with the Mercies, which is why I'm bringing it up, because it's all based on these amazing women who live on the coast. The Island of Sea Women is set in the island of Jeju in South Korea, and it's about the women who are free divers there, who free dive for seafood specialities, and just absolutely incredible. It's historical fiction, so it's a lot about when the Japanese invaded the island and what happened then, and it's got some really awesome, strong, powerful characters that you're just rooting for them the whole way through. So sorry, that was actually 26 books, but I have a lot more playlists coming, so if you enjoyed my recommendations, please subscribe. Let me know if you have any recommendations for powerful female leads in books. I would love to read them and get them out of my local library. Thank you for watching.